Greetings to all of you joining us for this video today. This is the 10th and final in this session, the series of videos which we are producing in order to enhance your marks in the English final exams in November. Because you are watching this, the chances are that you are going to boost your marks enough to ensure that you are a distinction level candidate. In this final video, we are going to take a look at the literature paper. Now, I'm doing this in an unusual way. I'm going to first start with a previous literature paper. This is the one from November 2015. I do not yet, obviously, have a common literature paper to deal with this year's literature. Sorry about that. Most of you, I know, are doing either short stories, My Children, My Africa, or poetry. Very few of the first additional language candidates, which you are, I assume, are doing anything else. So, let's take a look at this out-of-date, obsolete paper, but it will be a very good guide on what you can expect when you are writing your final paper 2. Now, the first thing I want to stress, you must only answer the questions for which you have been properly prepared. If, for example, you are studying short stories and My Children, My Africa, you must not attempt to tackle the poetry questions no matter how fond you are of poetry. It will not work. This is a silly example, but you would be shocked at how many times I have seen candidates making that mistake in their final paper 2s. It's not too common, but it is unfortunately common enough to be noted every year on the markers reports. And I've actually got one of those reports, which I'm going to not share with you, not the whole report, but I have summarized various items from the report showing the problems encountered and the main mistakes made every year. But let's start by taking a look at this paper. First, marks 70, time 2 hours. Now, I assure you, you will have plenty of time. 2 hours for a paper like this, you're going to laugh about it. I know people who have finished it, very well too, by the way, within 30 minutes. But I don't want you to rush through it. That wasn't an invitation to disaster. What I'm saying is that 2 hours for a paper of this type is plenty. Take it slowly. Do not rush. Concentrate, focus, check the questions to make sure you understand them. Be very careful with your answers. Make sure that your answers address the question and are according to instructions. Remember, we looked at answering comprehension tests. That was in number 5, as I recall, lesson number 5. You must apply those rules in this, when you are answering this paper as well. Be careful that you know exactly what the question is asking. Obey the rules when you are quoting. Make sure that your quote is the correct length. All of those same things. Now, let's move on slightly. You will see that you first got your instructions and information. Now, a paper 2 is thick. It's very thick indeed, because it's got to present questions on all the possible literature that has been selected. So, there we go. You're going to open it up, and on your instructions and information, you're going to see this: novel, drama, short stories, and poetry. You're going to have chosen one of those, 2 of those 4. Now remember also, when you are writing these exams, the first thing that's going to happen is you are going to walk into the exam hall probably at 8:30. You are going to sit down, you are going to have the rules and stuff read to you. By 8:45, you will have filled in your number and various other details on your answer book. And at that stage, you will be given the question paper so that you can go through the paper for 15 minutes before you start to write. It's at that point you are to open up and check where, on what page, are the genres that you have selected. Now, for simplicity's sake, I know that most of the schools have selected the drama, My Children, My Africa, and the short stories from the book of Changes, it's entitled. So, for the purpose of this, I am not going to focus very much on the form of the novel, but it doesn't really matter because short stories are in fact merely a shortened form of a novel. So, drama and short stories will be our focus. However, I shall also be giving some time to poetry. Good. So let's take a look. Let's assume you have chosen My Children, My Africa, and short stories. So you're going to go to drama and then to short stories afterwards. Now I'm going to run through any other instructions. It says here first, number 1, do not attempt to read the entire question paper. Yes, that is a very clear instruction. Only address the genres that you have studied. Okay, there it gives you those. And then it says use the checklist on page 4 to assist you. Follow the instructions at the beginning of each section carefully. Always read the instructions. You have the time to do it, especially in this paper. Read those instructions and take it slowly, slowly, slowly. Number your answers. Now, that has been a major problem in the exams. Year after year after year, the people either mess up the numbers or write the numbers so badly that they can't be read. Please be careful about your numbering. All right, start each section on a new page. Exactly the same instruction that you had in paper 1. Spend approximately 60 minutes on each section. Yes. Write neatly and legibly, please. And if you can't write neatly, at least write legibly so it can be read. Otherwise, it can't be marked. Now, let's go down a bit. The next thing you're going to do is to identify the genres that you have done. Okay, here, if this were last year and you had been at our school, you would have selected Nothing But the Truth and, of course, these short stories. But it's not. So this year, you are going to select possibly My Children, My Africa, which is a wonderful drama. I absolutely rave about it. And so do the guys in grade 12. Everybody agrees that it is a brilliant piece of literature. Then, the short stories. Possibly you're going to be doing poetry, in which case you'd go down to this section here and answer the questions on these poems. Now, let's start with drama. Now, this one's on page 17, Nothing But the Truth. So I'm going to scroll down to 17, which is here. There we are. We're on Nothing But the Truth. And as usual, now you've been through this for many years, you're going to be given an extract taken from the play, and then you are going to be given your questions on it. Nothing unusual about that, but let's take a look at the various questions. Now here, 5.1.1, this is what we call a cloze exercise, C-L-O-Z-E, where you fill in the missing words, and there you are given a choice of words with which to fill in the gaps. Then, refer to lines 3 to 4. What do we learn about Temba in these lines? Now, this is where things start to go wrong. You must concentrate. What do we learn about Temba? Character trait, right? Now, Obviously, we're not focusing on this play, but that will give you an idea of the sort of questions. Okay? Character. You must be familiar with the character traits of the characters in the play. Their personalities, in other words. All right, give 2 reasons. That's just straightforward, lower order questions. Explain why the following statement is false. Right? Now, you're already told that the statement is false there, and you've got to give reasons for it. Good. Explain why, Okay. Choose the correct answer. The word amnesty means to, Right? Okay, multiple choice question. Explain how right? Then, watch out for this one. There's a reason why I'm drawing your attention to this. Consider the play as a whole. Do you think, Discuss your views. Okay. Now, watch out. Those are the various types of questions you could encounter. There are more. Let's go down. You're going to get, if you're doing the drama, you'll get a second extract, and then more questions. Okay, the first questions here are simple, straightforward knowledge of the play. Okay, now, here we come to a stage direction. You must know how to answer stage direction questions. They are an important component of any written play. If you were, you see that? If you were the director of this play, how would you direct Mandisa to portray her emotions in lines 7 to 10? All right. Now, stage directions. You as the director have got to tell Mandisa, okay, lift up your right hand, lower your thumb. Okay, let your left hand go across your chest. Good. Now, open your eyes wide. Right? Stick out your tongue, etc., etc. You've got to give details about exactly how she must act at that particular point, how she must move her body, how her voice must be, everything like that. All right, so stage directions. And then the next question. Identify 2 different character traits, each for Character traits. Right? Identify and discuss one theme of the play that is evident in this extract. Do you think it is fair that, Discuss your view. All right? Now, I'm only going through, not the answers here, they are fairly irrelevant, but the types of questions that you can expect. First, that was for the drama. Now let's go on to the short stories. Again, you are going to get 1 extract per short story, and then you are going to answer the questions. And again, close question, you see that? Explain why the following statement is true, and you've got to state 2 points. Okay? There we are. Once again, you're not asked true or false. You are saying this is true. Why? Now, what does line 3 tell you about Mr. Willison's character? State 2 points. All right? Character traits. Explain how Mrs. Willison's treatment of Rob is different from that of Mr. Willison's. Okay, so behavior. Why? What is it that makes Mrs. Willison's treatment different from Mr. Willison, etc.? Okay, so that's a comparative question. And note the marks for that question. That's seriously good marks. 4 is the most that may be allocated for 1 question. Okay, and once again, a multiple choice question. Now here, explain both the literal and figurative meaning of. Aha! You must understand the difference between the literal and the figurative. And in our previous session, when we were dealing with summarizing, and as I recall, that was lesson number 6, you will see that we actually did an exercise where we converted figurative language into literal language. That would be an excellent piece of revision before you write your final paper 2. Okay? And then, do you feel sorry for Rob? Da 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 da. Discuss your view. And again, go back to that section on comprehensions, where we handled instruction words, and look at what it means to discuss. Okay, discuss. It's investigate, okay, using argument, logic, and you've basically got to explore around the topic. Good. We go on to our second one, extract. Right, 621. Explain why, da 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 da. Why does, da 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 da. All right? Write down one word that best describes Suki's feelings. Okay? Identify the figure of speech. Explain how this figure of speech contributes to the meaning of these lines. Okay? All valid questions. Identify and discuss one theme of the short story. 4 marks. That's a big one. Make sure you are able to answer questions like that. Do you agree that, da 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 da? Discuss your view. 4 marks. Okay? Make sure you are able to answer stuff like that. Bear with me. I'm going to go on to the poetry questions very briefly. I know that it is a minority of you doing poetry and that the majority are doing the short stories and the drama, but it would be a disservice to you poetry types if I were not to do this. Okay? Now, obviously, you've got the poem given to you. This is the poem Cheetah, and that doesn't really matter. It's a good poem, by the way. I like it. Now, complete the following sentence by using the words in the list. Okay, there's again a close task. Then, what do we have here? Refer to stanza 2. Identify the sound device. All right? Sound devices. Alliteration, assonance, rhyme, onomatopoeia. Right. Now, again, you are given the fact that the statement is false. Quote 3 consecutive words from stanza 3 to prove that the following statement is false. Remember what we said, again, in our comprehension section? If it says 3 consecutive words, you don't want 4, you don't want 2, it must be 3. Any other number is just wrong, and you're going to ruin your answer. You must pay attention to these instructions. If it says 3 words, then you quote 3. No more, no less. Please note that. Or if it asks 1 word, then you must only give 1 word. Now, explain the irony in the last 2, da 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 da. Okay, you must be able to explain what makes it ironic. They can ask you something like, what makes this an oxymoron? I hope you know what an oxymoron is. It's when 2 contradictory words are placed side by side, such as an honest thief or hot ice. Okay. Using your own words, explain da 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 da, right? Of what is the da 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 symbolic. Identify and discuss the theme evidence in this poem. Do you think the speaker is da 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 da? Do you think? And then again, discuss your view. Right? Same with the prayer for my countrymen. We're just going to look at the questions. Multiple choice. Refer to lines 3. Why are the times referred to as tragic? What are the complexities and terrors? Da 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 da. Refer to lines 5 to 9 again, specifically. Identify the speaker's tone in these lines. That's a valid question, which could come up in other poems. Explain why the speaker appeals to God for help. That's quite an interesting question. Okay. Through rotting days. Identify the figure of speech. Okay, again, identify figure of speech. Explain how the figure of speech is used here to express da 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 da. Okay, using your own words, give 3 examples da 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 da. Okay, once again, your own words, your own words. Do you think the title is appropriate to the content of this poem? Discuss your view. That is a generic question. That is a question that can be applied to almost any poem. So, there we go. People, we've run through these questions very briefly. Now, we're going to take a short look at, first, the comments on the moderator's report. You will find this an eye-opener. Let me see if I can find this. Okay. Here. This was the report in the November 2015 final grade 12 paper 2 literature. Moderator's comments and recommendations. Now, obviously, I'm not showing you the entire report. What I have done is just to condense it, to show you where the problems are. And in almost every section, the same problems have arisen. Let's take a look at these problems. Okay, here's drama. Now, I've cheated slightly here. I've said, my children, my Africa. That's a lie. These comments were, in fact, written about nothing but the truth. But they are equally applicable. Now, the first thing, if possible, watch a live performance of the play. As easy as that. If you can, do it. Please, please, please. I remember taking my grade 12 class to live performances of the play that they were studying. And it made a massive difference to their understanding. It's not only the fact that it increased their knowledge of the content, it's the fact that they understood exactly what a play is like. For most of them, it was the first time that they had been in a formal theater to watch a formal production of a play. And I had the privilege of watching John Carney act for the last time, which was a double thrill. But anyway, now, read the entire text, and not just once. You must be familiar with the text. You must be familiar with the content of the text. You must know who the characters are. You must know the little details, all the silent characters who are mentioned but who don't appear on the stage, and all these things. You must know when and where it is set. You must have a good knowledge of this. Now, learn how to interpret and apply stage directions. We did look at this earlier. Stage directions, very important. You are now the director. You must tell the person exactly how to move their body. How must they speak? What must the expression on their face be? It's up to you. You've got to give this in detail. What do you do at that point in the play? Good. Read, learn, and understand the glossary of terms and notes on the play. Glossary of terms, very important. Very often they'll ask meaning of specific words, but notes as well. Read those notes. The first time I pick up a play to read it, I go straight to the summary of the play. So I get a very quick, concise idea of what I can actually expect in the thing. It would also, just by the way, it would be fantastic for you to watch a live performance before you even start reading the play. I did this, and I'm mentioning this, I don't know if it's of any value to you, but many years ago, before I'd read Romeo and Juliet, I saw an extremely competent production done by a school, very creative, of the play, Romeo and Juliet. And I remembered almost every detail of that production. So when I read the play, it was easy. I knew already exactly what to expect. But anyway, let's move on at that point. Now, study the personalities of the characters. You must study everything about the characters. The personality matters. The appearance matters also. There must be a reason why they appear the way they do. But if it's not specified in the play, obviously it's not relevant. You can't base appearance questions on an edition that you've watched. It must come out of the text of the play. Learn the relevant traditions and cultural backgrounds of the characters. And in My Children, My Africa, this is doubly relevant because you've got a culture clash in the play. Learn and understand the themes. Do you see how many themes questions there were? The themes of both the drama as a whole and the individual scenes. Those questions are asked. You must be prepared to answer those questions. Oh, let me just go back there for a second in case you are taking down notes. My apologies. Right, I'm about to move on. If you want any more time on that, hit the pause button now. Now, in an exam, read and understand the questions with care, taking note of the instruction words. Pay close attention to the numbering of your answers. We've said that already. Let the mark allocation guide you regarding the required length and complexity of your answers. Obviously, if it's a 4-mark answer, which is the highest score they can give you, you're going to need to write enough to justify getting given 4 marks. Okay, so take note of that. Okay, just before we go on, that's what the internal moderator had to say about literature. Oh, sorry, about drama. Now we go on to short stories. Note that this is not the easy option. There's this misconception present in schools that rather than doing poetry or novels, go for short stories. They're short, sweet, and easy. Wrong, but it's too late for you to change that now anyway, so don't worry too much about it. Read the text of all the stories. Big mistake. People just focus on their study notes or maybe notes that they've taken down in class. You must read that story. Know and understand the personality differences between the characters, exactly the same as for the drama. Learn to recognize different aspects of tone and register, particularly in dialogue. When there's dialogue in a story, tone and register matter a lot. Now, wait, sorry, I'm running ahead too fast. If you want to take down notes, hit the pause button. Otherwise, I am moving on. In an exam, read and understand the questions with care, taking note of the instruction words. Exactly the same comment from the markers. Pay close attention to the numbering. Exactly the same. Let the mark allocation guide you. Exactly the same. No change there. Note the common errors being made. Let us move on. Oh, ensure that your answers are the length that has been specified. 1 word, for example, or 3 consecutive. Good. Now we go on to poetry. Now, this is an unusual comment. Poems are not to be treated as miniature comprehension tests. In other words, you shouldn't just be looking for answers in the text. You should understand the content. You mustn't just know it, you must understand it. Read and study all the poems. Study and make sure that you have read those poems and you know very well what the content is. Whenever possible, ensure that you know the background of both the poem and the poet. Poems are written for a specific reason. A poet doesn't just sit down and say, gee, I feel like writing a poem today. Let me see what I should write about. No. He or she is going to be inspired by something and then write it. Okay? And different poets are inspired by different things. Please take note of that. And then learn the themes or the messages of each poem. I actually get very nervous about addressing questions on theme because a lot of it is very subjective. What you are going to get out of a poem will be different from what I get. So themes, well, some of them will be obvious. Learn them. Good. There we go. Ensure that you are familiar with the meaning of all the words used in each poem. If, for example, you are studying Shakespeare's poems, and some of you are, you're going to struggle to understand many of the words. I mean, a star to every wandering bark. What is a bark? Well, it's a type of ship. But unless you've been told that, you're not going to know it. However, in your preparation and run up to exams, use one of these. A cell phone can be a wonderful thing. All you have to do is to turn it on and hit the Google, and you will get any answer to any question that you've got. I have yet to be dropped by Google when it comes to things like that. Well, I have actually been dropped once or twice, but when it comes to meaning of words, they will always supply the meaning. Normally you'll go to Wikipedia or something like that automatically. Learn to understand figurative language by changing it into its literal form, right? Again, I refer you to that exercise that we did in the summary lesson. It works. Do that for yourself. Okay, pick up figurative language and make sure that you are able to switch it across into its literal form. Okay, in an exam, and here you're going to hear a lot of the things the same. Read and understand the questions with care, taking note of the instruction words. Exactly the same. Pay close attention to the numbering of your answers. Exactly the same problems encountered by the different group of markers. Let the mark allocation guide you regarding the required length and complexity of your answers. It's exactly the same as the others. So there you have advice given by the people who actually mark these papers. Okay? Now we're going to go on. Oh, sorry. Ensure that your answers are the length that has been specified. Exactly the same. Okay? So don't worry. We're going to now look at specific types of literature, and I've just got to find this now. Introduction to literature. There we are. Here's short stories, but it goes into much more detail than merely short stories. So bear with me because there's a lot of aspects of literature tackled in this presentation. Please take a look here. The first question, and notice this can apply to any item of literature. Who is the author? That often matters because different authors have different experiences, causing them to write different things. Whether it is a drama or a story, short or novel, or is it poetry, the author is going to make a difference. Thomas Hardy, for example, wrote both novels and poems. Shakespeare wrote both drama and poems. Okay? But the whole point is you must know who they were, the author and the time in which he lived and where he lived and got his experiences. They are going to have an effect on the literature resulting. Now, title. Did you see in the question paper, it asks questions about the suitability of the title. Okay, I put there identifies and becomes synonymous with the work. Actually, other people have also written that, but you must know about the title and why it's appropriate. Setting, where and when the work occurs. Not all poems have a setting, okay, but usually a short story will have a specific setting. Usually the drama will have a specific setting, which is stated. Okay, so for stories or novels and drama, that is probably more important than for poetry. But now, characters. You've got here the protagonists, or the main characters, and the foils, those with whom they interact. Right, now, what do you need to know about the characters? Well, for a start, appearance. Appearance does matter. I mean, if you go to the play Dr. Faustus, and then Helen of Troy appears on stage, and the man looks at her with amazement and says, "Is this the face that launched 1,000 ships and burned the topless towers of Ilium?" If she hadn't been stunningly beautiful, that story, well, it wouldn't really work. So appearance does matter in context. Appearance, incidentally, is not only facial appearance and size of the person and everything like that, it's also how they dress. That can make a huge difference in a play. Good. Personality, obviously, that's the big one. Because the personality is going to ensure how the people act. Very appropriate to drama, very appropriate to short stories or novels. all right? And then, of course, action. What do they do? How do they react in certain circumstances? Do they quickly become angry, or do they calmly address the problem, or something like that? There's your action, what they do, which often reflects on their personality. Plot, okay, the denouement, the unfolding of the plot. The plot is basically the story. It can be relevant in certain poems, by the way, because you do get narrative poems, or what do they call it? Lyric poems. In all drama, in all short stories, you are going to have a plot. It follows a sequence of events, and you've got your rising action, and your climax, and then your resolution. Okay, and then you've got subplots, the plots within the plots. Not so common in short stories, obviously, because short stories are compressed, okay? But in certainly drama and novels, you get many subplots. Okay, let's move on. Themes. The main ideas or messages of the text and sub-themes as well. Now, here, bear with me for 30 seconds. Themes are subjective. Obviously, there are common themes in literature, conflict and love and war and etc., etc., etc. But I like to ask my guys, name a lesson or lessons that you learned from this piece of literature. And that actually is a perfectly valid way of testing a theme. Themes are not just those listed in a book. Say, this is the theme, and that isn't the theme, and this is a sub-theme, it goes deeper than that. It's what you learn from either the work as a whole or from the specific section, such as the act of a play, or that particular passage in a play. Now, style. Diction. Diction means your choice of words. And then, of course, language usage. Different people use English in different ways. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm merely saying they're different. It will depend on purpose, setting, and audience. If, for example, the play is set in Texas, everybody is going to speak with American accents. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in Texas, would they? Okay, so, and then they're going to use Americanisms, like howdy partner and stuff like that. Don't wince. That's in the cowboy movies I used to watch when I was growing up. But the whole thing, it depends on the purpose, the setting, audience, everything like that. The tone, the author's manner of expression, which helps to create the atmosphere or mood. Okay? Tone will be affected by the diction and the language usage as well. And here comes the mood, the atmosphere, the pervading feeling, pervading throughout. Okay? Certain pieces are gloomy throughout. One of the most depressing plays I've ever read is, of course, The Crucible by Arthur Miller. It starts off with a very gloomy mood, and then it gets much worse as the play progresses. Very, very gloomy, negative atmosphere in that one. Okay. Register is the degree of formality. Varies, obviously, according to purpose, setting, and audience. That's obvious. All right? Kids growing up in the township do not speak using the same degree of formality as kids growing up in a posh suburb. Okay, as that's appropriate to My Children, My Africa. Then, the intention. Why was the work written? That can be applied to anything. It can be applied to poetry, it can be applied to short stories, it can be applied to novels, it can be applied to drama. There's always a reason for that work to be written. Okay, and once again, it says they're usually related to the theme. And comparative literature, intertextual reading. Okay, you've got allusion. Your most common allusion, that's when you refer to another work of literature, when the most common allusion is to the Bible, and your second most common allusion is to the works of Shakespeare. Okay, those are the key literature works in English. Okay, appropriation, of course, is borrowing. That's when you take something as is from another work of literature. And in that case, you may even borrow things from other pieces such as music, right? Whatever it is, appropriation, borrowing. There we are, literature analysis. Now, let's take a brief look at short stories specifically. If you are not doing short stories, sorry about that. Please just bear with me or fast forward or something. A short story is a novel in miniature. It should have a short, effective introduction and an abrupt and preferably unexpected conclusion. Right, so beginning and ending. But the whole thing about it is you've got to introduce the characters and the setting and everything as quickly as possible within the first few paragraphs. Otherwise, you're going to run out of space, basically. The characters must be introduced using as few words as possible, and only relevant details about them should be given. Okay, the setting has to be established quickly and briefly. Now, well, just to go back for a second in case you want to take down that, that's not going to have that much effect on your exams, but this is important background. If you're wondering, for example, why don't they give us more detail about something? That's what it is. You're running against a word budget, so to speak. Literal language. Now here's definitions. The meaning is directly stated, such as in a report. Your figurative language, that's your idioms and figures of speech, which is non-literal poetic language, and we all know what these things are. Simile, metaphor, irony, euphemism, litotes, metonymy, synecdoche, hyperbole, etc. You must know the meaning of those words, by the way. It is required in the guidelines from the department. Moving on. Sound devices. They affect the tone or rhythm of poetry, but also used frequently in short stories and novels and drama. So there you've got alliteration, assonance, onomatopoeia, rhyme, etc., etc. Now, sorry, let me go back to that just in case you want to take down those definitions. Please hit the pause button, otherwise I am now moving on. Now, here goes. Person. First, second, and third person. This is what it's all about. The first person singular is I in the subject or me in the object form. First person plural. We in the subject or us in the object form. Good. Second person is you in the subject and object form singular, and you in the subject and object form plural. End of story. Second person is you. Good. Now the third person gets slightly more complex, and this can cause a little bit of confusion. You've got he, she, it in the subject form, and him, her, it in the object form. And then in the plural, it's they and them. Now, remember that English attempts to be gender specific, so you must know when to use he and when to use she. I have seen this cause confusion. But the reason I'm showing you this table, you might get questions on person in literature. I have seen it asked in a paper too. Good. The first person is used with the past tense to create a typical narrative. It causes the text to be subjective, usually, since it is seen through the eyes of a single person. Second person in literature. Very seldom used, but creates an effect of direct involvement for the reader when combined with a simple present tense. I have seen it used very, very effectively in a graphic novel. It was brilliantly done. It created such a sense of, I'm there. I'm with this guy. Okay? It was classic. Then, the third person. This is the most versatile. In other words, the most flexible. allows the reader to know the private thoughts and motives of all the characters. Okay, so you can really go far with the third person. Most authors starting out will write their first novel or whatever, or first short story in the first person, because it's the easiest to use. Okay, there we have person in literature. Why am I showing you this? In one of the exams, a question was written saying, explain why the author chose to write this in the third person. And there you have the answer. It allows the reader to know the private thoughts and motives of all the characters. Okay? Or that specific character. We can see into their mind. We can understand their motives and their decision-making processes. All right, let's move on a bit. I'm going to see if I can whistle up my poetry, and then we're done. There we go. For those of you who are doing the poetry, bear with me. We're going to look at a very few scant details. It won't be for too long, but this might make a difference to you. Oh, there's a poem on the board. Now, seeing that poetry is all about sound and not about only writing, I shall read the poem to you. I told the great 12s to get to it, but they really weren't willing to do it. They're hopelessly lazy, their minds are all hazy, so as for their cares, well, they blew it. Ha ha ha. Isn't that quick and witty limerick? That's the limerick form of poetry. And you will notice something interesting here. It is feminine rhyme. In other words, you've got two rhyming syllables at the end of each line. Here, you've got lazy and hazy. Here, they've got to it, do it, and blew it. Okay, interesting that. But you don't really have to know that. Okay, now what is poetry? Poetry is painting a word picture. I was taught this definition at school, early in my schooling career, and have used that definition ever since. Sorry about that. Poetry creates mental images through the use of figurative language, creative diction, rhyme, and meter. Now, I am disturbed by the modern trend to study poetry which does not even attempt to rhyme or to have a fixed formal meter. I like disciplined poetry. I must admit that from the outset. Now, most good poetry relies on being heard, not only on being read. Please take note of that. It's all about sound, which is why, unless it rhymes and has meter, it starts to become problematic already, because then you've got no sound to attract you to the beauty of the poem. Aspects of poetry to consider, very similar to the literature we have already studied. Who is the poet? It's the same as who's the author. When was the poem written? Once again, closely related to setting. Different people write poems at different times for different reasons, and will reflect the thinking patterns of the time. Why was it written? The same question asked for any item of literature. Now, sorry, let me go back to that before we run forward. That's just your background questions. Okay, there you've seen them. Poetry analysis. Now, first, you'll have to look at the theme or the message. And here I've put this comment again. What have you learned from it? Obviously, there will be fixed themes which the poet has woven in, but really that message, it's got to have something to do with the effect on you. Now, your form, your structure of the poem, the number of stanzas, and sometimes you've only got, the poem is written without any individual stanzas. Lines per stanza, use of enjambment, that's run on lines, and is there a refrain? Be careful about enjambment also. They can ask you to explain why the poet has used enjambment in that poem. And there are many different answers to that. He could be using it to increase the pace, such as in the poem, the the charge of the Light Brigade. There it's used to make sure that the poem goes faster and faster and faster and faster up to the 4th stanza. But in other poems, such as The Road Not Taken, the enjambment is used to show that the uncertainty of the guy's thought patterns. And in other poems, such as The Scorpion, it's used to show that the poet is showing that this is an old man speaking about his experiences, and he's deliberately not ending his sentences. The whole poem, it's a 4-stanza poem, it only contains 2 sentences. So be careful about enjambment. I suspect you can encounter questions on it. Refrain, of course, is also known as the chorus. It's lines repeated in every stanza. Diction, choice of words. And here are some examples of the types of words that you can encounter. Archaic words are no longer used in the spoken language, but they are still in the dictionary. Watch out. Slang is informal words and phrases used by a specific group of people. Informal words and phrases. Okay? And jargon is specialized words and phrases. For example, I mean, if you've got a cell phone, you're going to talk about apps, and you're going to talk about your gigs, and what are you downloading, and you're going to text. That's jargon. You may not realize it. For you, it's everyday language, but in actual fact, 20 years ago, that language didn't exist. Or well, let's make it 25 years ago. That language didn't exist. It was language that came along with cell phones and is used by cell phone users. Now, the tone, the mood or atmosphere of the poem, you can get questions on this, as you can get questions on the questions of the tone in any type of literature. There's some examples: friendly, sharp, sarcastic, ironic, angry, humorous, condescending, couldn't care less. Ominous is another one that I've encountered. So really, I would advise you to make sure that with all the poems that you have studied, you are able to identify the tone. Now, rhyme, which depends on sound, not spelling. Whether they are going to ask you questions on rhyme, I have no idea, but you do have to know about rhyme. You've got rhythm, the pace or the flow of the poem. It's not the same as meter, by the way. Meter is slightly different. The pace or the flow, the rhythm is, for example, whether you are creating the effect of the waves lapping on the shore. You know, you've got that one poem, Sea Fever, by Mansfield. It's, I must go down to the sea again, to the lonely sea in the sky. And you get the effect of the waves coming up there. It's very simple use of a 1-2 rhythm, but it's brilliant, and it reflects the content of the poem. Okay, and then here, it is affected by sound devices and meter. The meter is, of course, the stressed and unstressed syllables of a line. And then imagery, the combination of literal and figurative language used to create pictures in the mind. People, that's poetry. Right, and so we have drawn everything together. And we're going to end off at that point. That's literature. I cannot help you with much more than that. This has then been the 10th and final lesson in this series of lessons. I'm hoping that this, as was the case with the other lessons which we studied, I hope that this will lift your marks to the point where you are going to get a distinction in your exams. The rest, though, is up to you. You are going to have to use these as a guideline. Go through them, study, do the practice exercises. They will benefit you enormously. People, thank you very much for giving me your attention for these 10 lessons. I wish you success in your soon and coming exams. Goodbye.